the history of money and economics, you realize that India and China jointly produced more than 50% of the world GDP for 1700 years out of the last 2000 years of recorded human history. That is what 85% of human history. That's how rich Asia was. So whatever happened that happened in the last 300 years, if I may say, a kind of an aberration where the Britishers had this colonial rule, colonies world over, I realized that a lot of loot that has happened from the Asian continent, which was shipped back to Britain, and the British savings, which built most of the Western nations, including United States, Canada, or Australia, or several parts of Europe. So a lot of these Western nations are built by the British savings of the Indian and the Asian loot that happened during this colonial era that was there. Now, when I'm saying that extreme poverty is approaching the West, knocking the doors of the West, that comes from this particular understanding of economics, where in the last 50 years, the US dollar as the reserve currency has created an economic model where the West assumes the role of financialization of the Asian and the Middle East manufacturing and producing. Now, what is going to happen, and it is very interesting to know, in the last 50 years, that is from 1971, when President Nixon unhooked the US dollar from the gold standard, what happened was this particular concept of fiat currency came into force. Along with that, in 1973, Henry Kissinger sealed a deal with Saudi Arabia in what we call as the Oil for Security program, wherein the entire crude oil of the Middle East, that is OPEC, was to be sold in US dollars. And in exchange, the West, particularly the United States, would provide security to the Gulf. So from then, that's 1973 to 2023, this 50 years of cycle of dollarization has completely reversed in the sense that the role of United States have now completely flipped, in the sense that the role which the West assumed of just doing financialization of the manufacturing and the actual produce of Asia and the Middle East, that is now in tatters, which means that the world of fiat currencies is going to come to an end very, very soon. How does it happen? Well, there's a history of how currencies become the reserve currency status. So before, the baton of leadership passed from Britain to United States, pound was the reserve currency status. Now, how does the reserve currency status change? So two important facts that the world needs to be aware of when we talk about economics is, one, energy is the real reserve currency. Okay, dollar or pound, they were just riding on it with military might or whatever diplomacy that they did, the West did. All right. Gold and silver is a real purchasing power of the currency. All right. You can issue electronic entries if we talk about private cryptos. You can issue currency notes. The central banks can issue those. But the real purchasing power is gold and silver. So when United States had this particular role during the World War, where it supplied war supplies to the allied countries in Europe, it collected all the gold in exchange from the European allies. Once entire gold in physical terms was accumulated with the United States, and Britain lost the hegemony after the wars, or the diplomacy might, if we call it. After that, with the ownership of the physical gold that United States had, it could impose United States dollar as the new reserve currency under in the Bretton Woods Agreement after the World War. So this is how reserve currencies shift, all right, generational shift of reserve currencies take place. So from 2016, what we are witnessing is a de-dollarization drive by Asia, where Asia has started collecting gold from the West, gold and silver, precious metals from the West. And as we speak, at this year, that is 2022, India has, literally wiped out, if I say, London bullion stock market, right? And also the COMEX, right? So the West is passing on gold and silver, or tacit arrangement, or I don't know what that is, but Asia is basically collecting gold and silver from the West. And once Asia has this entire chunk of physical possession of gold and silver in a good, decent quantity, it is very obvious that the dollar is going to lose the reserve currency status. Now, dollar as a fiat currency, all fiat currencies, as I foresee, are going to fall anyways. But what does it mean when dollar loses the reserve currency status? Means that countries which are doing bilateral trade in dollars, say India is trading with Sri Lanka, the realization is, why do we need dollar in between? And what that means is that the endless capacity of the West of printing currency gets suddenly stopped. And once the endless printing capacity of the fiat currency-led Western countries stop, what that means is that the lifestyle of the Western countries are going to get a big, big trip. So this is where this entire prediction comes into being, that the fiat currencies are going to fall. Asia is going to launch BRICS currency, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And from what I understand and my reading is, there are 30 nations which are intent on de-dollarization. The BRICS currency would be launched next year. The pilot transactions will start, after which dollar would be gradually ousted from the reserve currency status, which means that the entire social benefits which the United States government and the European governments as well, because Euro also has 20% reserve currency status. So all the social benefits in terms of entitlement benefits, Medicaid, retirement 4001k, and all of these are going to have a huge cut, which also means that, if the West has to shift the manufacturing base back home from Asia and Middle East, that means and that end product which is made in USA or made in West has to stand along an Asian, Chinese, or an Indian product. What that means is that it is a cut into salary levels of Americans of around 60%. If you have to stand that competition, right? So it's a massive trim to the Western economy and their lifestyle. So this is what I believe we are heading towards.